Welcome back to Singapore and our coverage of the Patek Philippe Watch Art Grand Exhibition, the first one in Asia and the largest event mounted by the venerable watch brand of Geneva.
The Napoleon Room recreates the Salon of Patek Philippe in Geneva. They've not only recreated the interiors, they've also replicated the view of Lac Léman, or Lake Geneva.
The exhibition also traces the journey of Patek Philippe from its humble origins in Geneva to its current leadership in the field of high watchmaking, an uninterrupted path of independence and family ownership, which began with a partnership of Antoine Norbert de Patek and François Chapek in 1839. A history of watchmaking milestones represented in the collection of antique and rare timepieces borrowed from the Patek Philippe Museum in Geneva for the occasion. Although a capable watchmaking firm from the very beginning, it was a later partner's invention, the keyless winding watch by Jean-Adrien Philippe, that gave the tiny Geneva company a wider audience outside Switzerland.
I guess you could say this was the watch that put Patek Philippe on the map. They couldn't have hoped for a bigger endorser than the Queen of the British Empire herself.
In 1851, Philippe's patented keyless winding watch captured the interest of Queen Victoria during the Great Exhibition of London. Soon, every royal and aristocrat wanted a Patek Philippe in their pocket, although one Hungarian countess insisted on wearing it on her wrist. The first known Swiss wristwatch was born in 1868, although it would take Patek Philippe another 150 years to take the new trend seriously. In 1889, Patek earned a patent for a perpetual calendar mechanism for a pocket watch, which they introduced as a wristwatch decades later.
This was the very first perpetual calendar wristwatch of Patek Philippe. Imagine putting that extremely complicated mechanism into that small case.
The perpetual calendar remains the most emblematic complication of Patek Philippe and still occupies a revered position in the current collection. Other, though less celebrated firsts for a wristwatch include their first chronograph. At a time when most wristwatches featured simple time and date functions, Patek was already combining rare complications. Grand complication watches that found their highest expression in pieces like the legendary Caliber 89, with 33 complications, the most ever achieved by Patek Philippe.
This is another fantastic museum piece, Caliber 89, manufactured by Patek Philippe to celebrate their 150th anniversary. It's got over 1,700 parts inside it. Ooh. It doesn't matter if you can't actually use it. It's much too heavy, but it's a beauty to look at.
In 2000, Patek released another impressive double-faced grand complication to usher in the new millennium.
Not everyone is lucky enough to visit the museum in Geneva, but I would say that this is the next best choice. They have in here some of the most important pieces of Patek Philippe, not just historic or antique watches, but some of the most complicated pieces as well, like the Star Caliber of 2000.
With 21 complications packed within, including a Westminster chime that mimics Big Bens in London, it's still among the world's most complicated timepieces. One-off novelties produced to showcase watchmaking mastery, but with the same skill and artistry that goes into every model in the current collection.
Now we missed Basel World this year. The first time we missed it in about 8 years, I think. But that's okay because some of the models that were released in Basel World are here in Singapore.
5520 or Calatrava pilot alarm travel time is what happens when you combine rare but useful mechanical complications like 2 time zones and a 24-hour alarm with chime in a handsome watch design. I see a new Patek Philippe icon in the making.
It's a fantastic watch.
Tell me about the one that you released this year with the alarm. I think that's
the
just
alarm
amazing.
is it's quite impressive because it's even more complicated than a minute repeater. And I think at the beginning people didn't understood really the level of complication who was inside the watch. So it's a fantastic watch in terms of success. But there's just a few of them. We are talking a watch where inside the watch, in the movement, I mean, we have about 627 parts inside. It's a lot of parts. There's a lot of technicity. And this is why I cannot produce that many. I think people understood that. Suddenly they say, wow, that's a unique watch. And it's very successful, but it's going to be very difficult, more difficult than the Nautilus.
The Nautilus Stern mentions is, of course, a whole different story. Like the pilot travel time when it was first released in 2015, the sporty luxury watch launched in 1976 was criticized for its unusual avant-garde design and choice of stainless steel for the case and bracelet. Today, you're lucky to get your hands on one, even a used one, that now sells at twice, even thrice the original price.
I'm very happy and proud about it. But Nautilus, I don't want to increase. I think it's very important that you have a wide selection of different type of watches. If you are only focusing only on one style like the Nautilus, what's going to happen? Well, if I produce more of them, I will sell them. But in 2 years, it will stop. People will get bored about it. They will say, well, everybody owns one. I don't like it anymore. That's the first case. And second case, when it will happen, the whole company will be destroyed because you're going to bet only on one product. And I think this is very dangerous. But I agree with you, Nautilus is a big trend today, but it's limited. Not everybody will get one, yes, I know, and I'm sorry about it, but that's how it is. Quantity and quality, they don't get along. I always say it.
Although it's a model in the regular collection, the Nautilus has become so popular, so much so that like the rarer grand complications of Patek Philippe, you need to be a long-time client of the brand or a known collector to get on the shortlist of qualified buyers. I call it the Patek Philippe paradox, the unintended self-fulfilling cycle of selling in-demand models to the same client elite. And yet, instead of increasing production, Patek would rather take the hit.
The more we get known, the less market share we have on one sense. But now how do we do that? Well, I have, of course, to please our clients. But on the other side, I also have to please the newcomers, new clients who are starting also to have a collection. And this is difficult, so I always try to keep a right balance between what I will keep for our VIP and what I will keep for the newcomers. I have to keep some pieces for those people.
The challenge to meet demand has produced more creativity and diversity in the product range, and models that raised eyebrows initially. The Aquanaut in the 90s and the Pilot Travel Time more recently were attempts to attract newcomers with designs that deviate from the tried and tested, no matter how risky.
So it's not a matter of just asking the market what do they think. The market will always tell you, launch something who works. They will never tell you, you have to do this, or that. I never had an input, a concrete input about what should I do. People are not taking a risk. I have to. So I think that today they understood that. They say, okay, we're going to leave Mr. Stern taking the risk. We believe in it. And we hope it's going to work. So who is going to decide that? Only me, yes. Because it takes courage, You're going to invest millions and millions in terms of new movement, in terms of cases. And if it's not successful, it can be dangerous. But after 30 years now of creating all the collection, I think that I know what I have to do.
Your predecessors have been courageous as well, launching technology, launching models that were ahead of its time or unaccepted at its time. What would you say, because I looked at the museum collection, would be the most significant watches that Patek Philippe ought to be remembered for?
Well, it's difficult because we can always do better. I would say from now on, maybe people will say it's a caliber 89 because it was really something quite amazing. But you know, every year we are launching something new, so it's not there is not an end. Today I'm working, for example, in terms of movement for 2032, 33. That means until there, every year I know what I'm going to launch. And believe me, there will be also exceptional watches. So it's difficult for me to tell you which one, as it's a never-ending process, you know. The only advice I can say to my kids or to people who will start in the industry is take your time, listen to the market, don't just go straight for the most complicated watches because this will not work. You have to improve yourself year after year.
And that, I suppose, is the single most important benefit of being the oldest and last remaining completely independent family-owned watch company. To draw wisdom from one's heritage and inspiration from one's own vision, to grow at one's own pace. A strategy that helped the company survive wars and financial crises in the past, and the disruptions brought by the new digital technologies of the future.
Believe me, watchmaking is totally different. I think it's still something mechanical who bring you down on earth, and people need that. You know, and the digital business, I don't have anything against it. I think it's great, you know, and they're doing great product. But sorry, it's not the same, you know. It's a different field for me, and I cannot compete with that. I don't want to compete. I have no idea how to make a digital watch. The budget that they have are 100 times bigger than mine. So, you know, why should I start a war that first I don't like, and secondly that I will lose? No, I think let's work on what I know. Let's work on what people expect from me, and it's mechanical watches. They are still there, and they will still remain. That's for sure.
And that's what Patek Philippe is all about.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Mr. Stern. Thank you. And that's all for this episode of Executive Class. I'm David Celdran. Thanks for watching.